In the narrative war that has surrounded Russia's invasion of Ukraine, one of the most persistent myths propagated by Moscow and its allies, perhaps even the most persistent, has been that Ukraine is beset by a severe Nazi problem, requiring a solution dubbed de-Nazification, which, according to Russia, has merited a total invasion. Yet the fact is that Ukraine has no disproportionate neo-Nazi presence. In fact, its challenges with far-right extremism are considerably less severe than many of its own European neighbors. Meanwhile, Russia itself has harbored an expansive and ever-growing network of neo-Nazi organizations, consistently tolerating their activities and even giving them the green light, incorporating them into the Kremlin's own military and political strategy. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, Russian propagandists have referred to the far right's presence in Ukraine as exceptional and in need of military intervention, although the aim of defeating Nazism would be a valiant one. Ukraine does not truly suffer from an unusually high proportion of neo-Nazi voters or militants. The militant organization most commonly pointed to as a neo-Nazi enclave in Ukraine is the infamous Azov Brigade, formerly known as the Azov Battalion, often portrayed alongside symbolism of the Black Sun. But is this perception a reality? No. Let this fact be known in a variety of ways. First and foremost, Azov staunchly rejects the principles of xenophobia, racism, anti-Semitism, and sexism. Ethnic Georgians such as Bakfa Chigobava and Georgy Kubarishvili are two prominent examples of foreigners who have fought for Ukraine as members of Azov. Another prime example of diversity within Azov can be found in the combat medic Asan Isanagiev, a Muslim and Crimean Tatar who fights within the organization to this day. For a supposed anti-Semitic military group, Azov seems to have a strange number of Jewish leaders, such as former Chief Sergeant Daniil Rybalchenko or present Chief Sergeant Oleg Krysenko. Azov has countless Jewish members, such as Ruslan Serbov or Vladimir Zvinyatski, renowned for the defense of their homeland. Vyacheslav Likachev, a Ukrainian political scientist of Jewish origin, has pointed out to quote, "It must be clearly understood there is no kind of neo-Nazi Ukrainian militia now. Azov is a regular military unit, subordinate to the Ministry of Internal Affairs. It is not an irregular division, neither a political group. Its commanders and fighters might have personal political views as individuals, but as an armed police unit, Azov is a part of the system of the Ukrainian Defense Forces." The chief rabbi of Ukraine, Moshe Reuven Asman, gave support to Azov during the Russian incursion upon the Azovstal plant. Jewish philanthropist Leonid Nevzlin granted his public support to Azov, and the head of the United Jewish Community of Ukraine has himself stated that he does not believe that any neo-Nazi elements exist within the Azov organization. French Jewish philosopher Bernard Henry Levi has granted his support to Azov, and after having filmed 2 documentaries on Ukraine himself. What of the patch seen on screen? Is this not a clear copy of the Nazi wolf's angel, you might ask? Far from it. The symbol of Azov stands for nothing other than national idea, with the N and the I taken from the ancient traditional Ukrainian script, crossing in the form of the symbol which Azov wears. Regardless, Azov doesn't generally use this image contemporarily. Rather, Azov, specifically the 3rd Assault Brigade under the command of Beletsky, which is a continuation of the old Azov, now utilizes this symbol. But hasn't Azov had overtly Nazi members? Yes, this is true, but as Vyacheslav Likachev, who has been already previously quoted, notes, there were some individuals with neo-Nazi background and far-right views among the people who founded the Azov Battalion in the very beginning in 2014, though even not all of the founders had such a background. For example, among the first members of Azov, there were activists from the Euromaidan volunteer groups and many Jews, including at least one Israeli citizen. Most of the soldiers with far-right background left the regiment by the end of 2014. The rest of the far-right radicals who clearly articulated their views were discharged in 2017 by the order from the new commanders of the regiment. As of today, there are absolutely no grounds for accusations that neo-Nazis serve in the Azov Regiment. Andrei Beletsky, previously mentioned as now commanding the 3rd Assault Brigade, is a former neo-Nazi who was influential in the formation of Azov in 2014, but even he has since, for the better part of the last decade or more, radically shifted his political worldview and has officially denounced Nazism and racial prejudice altogether on multiple occasions, as Cambridge noted in its 2022 paper Between Frontline and Parliament. Over the last years, Beletsky has repeatedly denied making, before 2014, racist statements ascribed to him, and even claimed that if somebody had called me white leader face to face, that person would have been beaten. Beletsky still publicly opposes multiculturalism, but he admits that to be a Ukrainian nationalist today is to believe in values, not racial prejudice, and announced that his new party does not use an ethnic criterion to define who can and cannot be part of the Ukrainian nation. To those who complain of torch marches in Ukraine, one has to ask in return, what of them? Should we next believe that the Red Cross Society's torch marches in Italy are signs of neo-Nazism? This would also be just stupid and ridiculous to believe. If none of this is enough, you can rest assured that the Azov Regiment themselves have already denounced neo-Nazism officially years ago on their own Telegram when they stated in unmistakable words, "We despise Nazism and Stalinism." But what of the infamous black sun symbol which Azov has used? As of 2015, only a year after Azov was founded, and note, Azov is over 10 years old now, the usage of this symbol was completely discontinued. Regardless, due to the prominence of sun wheel imagery within Ukrainian history, this symbol is generally not associated with Nazi ideology whatsoever within Ukraine's popular consciousness. A prime example of the usage of the sun symbol within Ukraine's culture with no connection to Nazism whatsoever may be found within the book Black Sun by Vasil Shaklir, a book about the war against Russian expansionism. Even though the book's content never relates to Nazism at any point in time, it might seem strange to Westerners from the outside, but within the context of Ukrainian culture, this is simply the norm. Regardless, Nazis which were involved within the organization by 2017 and hadn't filtered out of Azov on their own were expelled by force, as noted by the deputy commander of Azov, Sviatoslav Palamar, in May of 2023. Right Sector, a militant organization at the forefront of Ukraine's defense both during the Euromaidan protests and presently in the war against Russian imperialism, has no connection whatsoever to Nazism. Despite ludicrous correlations made by Russian state TV between Right Sector and the Nazis, Right Sector, in fact, adheres to the principles of revolutionary nationalism based upon the ideals of Stefan Bandera. In its own words, it states, "Our attitude towards Russians, as well as towards other representatives of national minorities, fits well into the methodology proposed by Stefan Bandera, fraternal towards those who fight with us for the statehood of the Ukrainian nation, tolerant to those who recognize our right to be masters of our own destiny on our own land, hostile to those who deny this right. We believe that the de-Russification of Ukraine is a completely fair and necessary phenomenon. The concept of de-Russification means that ethnic Ukrainians will return to their own speech, history, and identity. Together, we defend the right of all national minorities, including Russians, to educate their own identity and culture. We do not confuse this right with the activities of foreign, chauvinistic, imperial centers, whose activities must be terminated." The founder of the organization, Dmitry Yarash, has denounced allegations of Russophobia within Right Sector, as well, stating, "I'm from Dnipro-Zhirynsk and 40% of our members speak Russian." Regarding Russian propagandizing, which postulates the existence of anti-Semitism within the organization, Right Sector has had many Jewish leaders, including Borislav Veriza, who headed Right Sector's information department for multiple months in 2014, a direct descendant of Jews who were victims of the Holocaust. In a very important and noteworthy instance, Right Sector has provided Jews with protection in Odessa and met with the chief rabbi of Odessa to stand in solidarity with the Ukrainian Jewish community. The truth is that Nazism and anti-Semitism have often in the distant past been popular within Ukraine. Ukraine's own Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists was indeed correct when it stated that in 1941 the Ukrainian people could often be very anti-Semitic, and this was indeed a popular attitude. But the Ukraine of the past, the Ukraine of 1941, isn't the same as the Ukraine of today. Times change, peoples change. Even the Ukraine of 2014 is already so distinct and different from what Ukraine is today that it is an impossible serious case to make that Nazism is at all popular within modern Ukraine. While Ukraine's far-right elements have been largely contained and far removed from a genuine Nazi problem, Russia has, on the other hand, for decades fostered an entire ecosystem of neo-Nazism. Unknown to much of the international community, particularly here in America, Russia is hiding its own trail of Nazism, a sordid secret occasionally ignored by Russia's authorities, sometimes encouraged and, in the most damning cases, actively facilitated. What is the history of Russia's relationship with Nazism, and why is it important? I covered the relationship between the Third Reich and the Soviet Union in a separate video, so there's no need to discuss that here. Here, I will keep the conversation limited to history relevant to today's Russia. In 1980, the National Patriotic Front, known as Memory, was founded in the Soviet Union. At its peak, it boasted 3,000 members, a relatively small organization, yet Memory became the most important and overtly anti-Semitic organization in late Soviet Russia, aligning itself with neo-Nazism, Tsarism, Orthodox fundamentalism, anti-Zionism, and anti-Semitism. Memory preached the existence of a global Judeo-Masonic conspiracy aimed at destroying the Aryan race, which for some reason it considered the Russians a part of. Anyway, despite its limited membership, Memory was loved across Russian society. Russia's own cultural sectors openly embraced it, with bands and musicians such as Andrei Makarevich, Civil Defense, DDT, and others paying homage. Even the CSKA football club fanbase incorporated Memory's symbolism into their own designs. The prominent political theorist Alexander Dugin would attempt to join Memory in 1988, only to be kicked out due to his connections with the occult, having previously been involved in Russia's Black Order of the SS since 1980. The leader of the band, Civil Defense, previously mentioned as a sympathizer to Memory, would be influential later on in the formation of Dugin's own National Bolshevik Party of Russia in 1993. Today, Alexander Dugin is one of the most famous contemporary political theorists around the world, and an especially heavy influence within the government of Vladimir Putin. Alexander Dugin, in his publication Jews and Russia, stated, "Squeezed between the partly justified anti-Semitism of Russian patriots and the Western rationalistic, market-oriented, subversive, and anti-state orientation of the bulk of today's Russian liberal Jews, Jewish Orientalism is going through hard times." Emerging in 1990 from Memory's legacy, Russian national unity was born, adopting a red swastika interwoven with the red star of Bethlehem as its logo. During the 1993 constitutional crisis, the RNU, alongside the National Bolshevik Party, sided with the Supreme Soviet in confrontation with President Yeltsin opposing his market reforms. They provided both logistical and military support to parliament, participating in barricades around the White House, fortifying the building, and fighting in the streets against Yeltsin's forces. By the mid-1990s, the RNU, Russian National Unity, had between 15,000 and 25,000 members, according to different sources. Despite being banned in certain regions, it operates still today unofficially, with likely ties to law enforcement and local officials. RNU violently targeted Russian liberals, left-wingers, Protestants, Catholics, Jews, and ethnic minorities, particularly in the Caucasus. Leaders of the RNU, including Alexander Barkashov and their subordinate members, have now played an important role in Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as the government has masked its genocide with anti-Nazi rhetoric while employing Nazi proxies to further the goals of the state. Other neo-Nazi organizations which emerged around this time included the National Revolutionary Action Front, which, founded near the anniversary of Hitler's Beer Hall Putsch as a self-expressed monarcho-fascist organization, lasted from 1993 to 1999, during which time it incited ethnic hatred and would lay the framework for the foundation of Russia's National Bolshevik Front. The Russian National Union, founded in 1993, encouraged racism and anti-Semitism in Russia, and while it faded by 1999, it was succeeded by the Russian National Socialist Party. The National Popular Party, founded in 1994, advocated for one blood, one state, forming alliances with Russia's National Bolshevik Party, Russian Goal, and National Republican Party. Its leader, Ivan Shugarevsky, was held for only 1 year in custody for inciting ethnic hatred before being released by the state. The Slavic Union, founded in 1999, and although suffering an official ban from the state, rebranded itself to Slavic Power and then had no practical enforcement placed upon it by the state in regards to the previous ban. In 2012, Slavic Power, also known as the Slavic Union, was officially recognized by the World Union of National Socialists. Founded in 2002, the Russian Imperial Movement has become one of the most notorious terror organizations, if not the sole primary most notorious terror org, to operate out of modern Russia, being condemned by the US, Canada, and even the European Union. It provides training to neo-Nazis from Germany, Poland, Finland, Sweden, and various Atomwaffen members, and has been involved in far-right conferences and alliances with various global neo-Nazi organizations, enabling attacks on infrastructure, transportation, and even civilians. Also founded in 2002, the Nazi DPNI, or Movement Against Illegal Immigration, masquerades as an anti-immigration group, while its most important purpose has been the organization of the neo-Nazi Russian marches. These marches, which began in 2005 until their end in 2021, featured various chants such as "Down with the Jewish Yoke," "Stop Feeding the Caucasus," as well as "Kill the Koch, Save Russia," and banners that featured the Nazi Kolvarat symbol, as well as slogans such as "Down with the Judeo-Masons" or "Russia without a leader is what Jews are without a Talmud." By 2013, 40% of Russia definitively supported these marches, with many more Russians being completely indifferent, while only 26% of the population opposed to them at all. The BTO, or Combat Terrorist Organization, active between 2003 and 2006, while small, carried out a campaign of terror that included arson, armed robberies, and attacks on minorities. The 2003 murder of Kim Hyun-ik, the 2004 stabbing of a 7-year-old Khurshida Sultanova, and the 2006 murder of Lampsar Samba. Despite these atrocities, the Russian government never intervened. Only when journalists began exposing the BTO did authorities finally act. Simultaneously, politicians like Senator Nikolai Kondratenko resorted to overt anti-Semitism in their speeches, blaming Jews for Russia's problems and invoking Judeo-Masonry over 60 times in one instance, as Nikolai himself would recall regarding the Russian elections, quote, "I called for a riot at the time, and the Russian people didn't listen, didn't support. As a result, it was not the red Zyuganov who was elected president, but Yeltsin's Putin. Newspapers do not write what the government wants, and no one cares. They went to the polls, 37% of voters voted for the communists, 60% for the Jews." Founded in 2004, the Russian NSO, or National Socialist Society, committed over 27 murders while allying with other neo-Nazi organizations. Despite its explicit extremism, it continued to operate for years, even after official bans. Similar was the White Power Crew, active until 2021, which carried out racially motivated murders, arson, and infrastructure attacks with little to no government interference either. In 2007, the Battle Organization of Russian Nationalists and the Great Russia Party were founded, with Great Russia amassing over 58,000 members. It formed alliances with DPNI and other extremist groups, and openly decried Jews as a corrupting presence in Russia. Today, it's led by Andrei Savelyev, a former member of the State Duma. On their official website, Great Russia has stated, "In the Christian era, not only Christians of all confessions, but also Mohammedans formed a disgusting opinion of the Jews. The history of all countries eloquently tells what supported such an opinion. It was supported and is now maintained by daily observation of the very method of Jewish life for 30 centuries." No discussion is complete without mentioning Russia's Wagner paramilitary company, founded by the neo-Nazi Dmitry Yudkin in 2014. Yudkin, famous for signing correspondences in lightning bolts and greeting subordinates with Heil, named the group after Hitler's favorite composer, Richard Wagner. By 2023, Wagner boasted 85,000 members, including a Rusich detachment that openly uses Nazi symbolism and played a very important role in the invasion of Ukraine under its then leader Prigozhin. Founded in 2020, AWD Rusland, or Atomwaffen Division Russia, collaborates with the Russian Imperial Movement and the terrorist group O9A, engaging in terrorism and ritual killings. Although occasional raids occur by the government, the Russian state shows no real intent to stop these groups, preferring to maintain its ties and further its other strategic aims instead of outright ban these organizations definitively. Briefly mentioned beforehand, the Russian branch of the neo-Nazi organization O9A, or Order of Nine Angels, has been involved in a number of satanic ritual killings, a history which was cemented in the murders of O9A member Nikolai Ogolobiak, who was involved in the brutal killing of 4 young teenage girls in 2008. Ogolobiak would be pardoned for his heinous and unforgivable crimes in 2023 as a reward for fighting for Russia's Storm Z unit of convicts in its invasion of Ukraine, showing just how far the state is willing to go to gain the support of these extremists. Ogolobiak and his associates in the O9A during their 2008 killings, after murdering 4 children, had cut off the heads of their corpses, ate their tongues and hearts out, and proceeded to have sex with their dead bodies. Remember, only to be pardoned by Putin himself after 13 years for supporting the Russian state's imperial conquest. Even within the last couple years, Vladimir Putin has turned to anti Semitism as well, stating in one interview, "These people that are attacking the church, they are not atheists. They're absolutely faithless people, godless people. Well, ethnically, many of them are Jews. These are people without kin or memory, with no roots. They don't cherish what we cherish." In September of 2023, he first said, "The Western masters put a person at the head of modern Ukraine, an ethnic Jew with Jewish roots, with Jewish origins, to cover up the anti human essence that is the foundation of the modern Ukrainian state." What's the takeaway from all of this? It's simple. Ukraine's Nazi problem is a fiction conveniently deployed to justify Russian aggression. Russia's own entanglement with neo Nazism, meanwhile, is very real, deep, and ongoing. Russia is the nation that has fostered a whole biome of extremist violence, tolerated it in public life, and leveraged it for its own political and military ends.